Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. Just to get things started, I wanted to make sure to tell everybody that this is not necessarily a tutorial like I usually do, but it is a work in progress. So I hope you find it instructive, even though I'm not really instructing. Anyway, story time. I made a while back a YT 2400 from the Star Wars franchise, and I was pretty proud of it at the time. It's not the best model, though. I loved it, and I wanted to keep it in VR. Here I am with it parked outside my Oculus home, if that's even a thing anymore. So I built it based on the rule, which is kind of a silly rule, low polygons and complex textures. And that was kind of what I went with. And it was very bare bones. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I was really proud of it, but it's not really up to any kind of standard that I would be of today. So I decided to go back and redo it. So I started with modeling this this kind of blueprint of Dash Rendar's ship from Shadows of the Empire, which is the Outrider. And I wanted to make it different. I didn't want to, do a one-to-one copy of the Outrider, but it was probably the best looking YT 2400 outline I could find. So I went for it and just kind of modeled around that. And you can see what I'm doing here, not to get too instructive on this video or too preachy, is I just kind of went around and tried to outline in the geometry all of these little nooks, crannies, little places that would pop up or go down. And then I just moved the geometry around with extrusion to make it pop. So instead of trying to work with just baked geometry into a texture map, we're actually doing the hard work of making all of these little things. And you can see here, I tried to do everything in sections. So there's kind of a stigma when you're starting out with 3D modeling that everything has to be connected and all of these different parts have to be one model, but it doesn't have to start out that way. In fact, the way that I did this was I modeled each section individually. You can see here I'm just kind of putting together I don't want to go to Star Trek and say saucer section, but for lack of a better word, saucer section of the model. And I didn't even want to do the whole saucer section. I cut out a large portion of this just so that I could do it in segments. So I wanted to make sure that nothing looked like it belonged together in one piece. Here I just kind of adjusted things around and gave it a little indent. So we have that there, and I messed around with the geometry. Not everything I did was successful, especially not this part. I tried to make it so that it would look like it tucked under a bit, and that didn't end up looking very good, so I got rid of it. But yeah. So as I went, I just kind of tried to adjust things around, and then I took off the backside so that it looked like it was just the front piece. So we have an individual piece that fits in. So that everything looked segmented, very constructed, very put together in panels. And so yeah, I did the same thing that I did before on the kind of gunner or the turret area, and I just went through and made little indentations where all of the paneling should go. I changed a little bit of it around. I didn't do it one for one. But I did my best to follow the same kind of patterning. another thing I did was to mirror each piece, each section, as its own object, so that I could get a top and bottom pretty easily. And I think it turned out pretty well that way. Of course, I turned on clipping so that it would become one piece, but everything's origin was set to 0, 0, 0, and that meant that everything just kind of mirrored. So it worked out just fine. It did the same thing here with the turret area, and ended up looking pretty good. And so yeah, again, I just made other pieces. Finally, I was done with the main section of the hull, and I just kind of gave it some textures just to make it look fun. But yeah, that was the main hull was done, and I just had to add the bridge, I guess. I don't know if call it a bridge, a cockpit. It was the cockpit I added later. Then I did a rough sketch of what the interior would look like, and I used the Boolean tool basically to cut out the internals, because I wanted to do a really advanced model. I wanted to do the inside and outside, or I guess outside and inside. So here's just kind of a fly through of what the general hull looked like when I was done cutting out all the internals. So we go around the corner here, we have a little place to go into the turret, we have storage, and then we have crew quarters, the main area, the captain's quarters right there, and then we go down the hallway, and that goes to the cockpit. So the cockpit was right there, and of course there's space behind. So then it was time to paint the ship, and to do that I just took it into Substance Painter and did a kind of once over with the color palette, the paint color palette that I had chosen, doing some damage, doing some metalness. But of course, no ship is complete without tchotchkes, so, or greeblies, I guess. So what I did was I used the Blender 3.0's new feature of the asset management, the asset library, to do a different blend file with basically all of these different greeblies, and yeah, I just modeled them one by one. Then of course, after I was done modeling, the task became putting all of the stuff in Substance Painter and making them look good. So I just did each one pretty much the same kind of scheme, iron then paint. So I would just do a nice iron texture, paint it, mess it up a bit, and kind of move on. Pretty low resolution here. Not really anything too fabulous, because you're not really covering that much space with the smaller greeblies that I did. Still want it to be usable, so some of these, depending on the size, I did maybe like 1K resolution. Some of them, most of them, the smaller ones were only 512. So yeah, it worked out pretty well though. And after I was done painting, for the most part, this isn't all the greeblies I made, but I just kind of took all the textures into Blender, did a little wall test just to make sure that they all looked good next to each other. Hard to know until you actually do it, but luckily the color palette worked out for me, and they were enough so that it looked randomized enough to be believable. After that was done, I also made some other pieces and put them in the same thing. One of them here is an animated foot to come down. So you gotta have some landing gear, right? Because otherwise it's useless. Landings are mandatory, takeoffs are optional, as they say in aviation. And it's no exception here in the digital world. So what I did was I modeled a little foot that animates, that articulates, and I did that using linear keyframes, or not linear keyframes, excuse me, linear shape keys. So yeah, you can see it opens up and then it comes down in that order. And as they say in Star Wars, this is where the fun begins. This is when I started to put all of the stuff together. So I made the little emissive map on the back for the engine that was going to change later, of course. But then I got to do all of these little greeblies. One of the things that I really missed on the first one that I saw on the Millennium Falcon, and I just wanted it really badly, was all of these little directional fins. And in my kind of head canon, I think of these fins as something that makes it easier for the engine to change its thrust based on whether or not they're in the atmosphere or not, because obviously it doesn't change how you fly in space. So just a way to redirect wind around the engine is what I think. And then I added these little vents. I used to think that they were shield generators, and I wrongly called them shield generators in my labeling thing. But when I was actually looking into research, I found that they are actually hyperdrive vents. So these hyperdrive vents on the back, so what I put on there, I built those again in just another blend file, and you can see that reflected here. And so yeah, I just glued a bunch of tchotchkes from the asset library that I created in another .blend file, and it made it really easy. So thank you very much, Blender 3.0. Ultimately, I did build some more stuff for the interior, but eventually I ended up with these ray traced renders, just to kind of give it. There's nothing like path tracing really to give your render that nice sheen. So I did take some stills from there, but I wanted it to ultimately be usable in VR. So I did take it into Unreal, and I baked all of the lighting. So here's what it looks like in Unreal with entirely baked lighting, ready for VR. Because ultimately I wanted to use it in any kind of metaverse project and have it be usable in lots of places. But yeah, I gave it a little bit of steam, a little bit of ambiance, and I think it turned out pretty well. So much improved from my original that had no interior and was very low polygon. But this turned out okay. So yeah, of course not as good as the beautiful path traced renders, but still looks pretty good for a VR project. Yeah, again, all of this baked lighting, no dynamic lighting, except for the sun, the directional light that acts as the sun, that's dynamic, because I couldn't get the baked lighting to look as good as I needed it to be. So I did change some stuff around in the interior, but yeah, I'm quite pleased with my inside and out little thing. And we got some crew quarters here that I didn't do a ray traced render for, but yeah, there are crew quarters, there are full captain's quarters. It is quite the ship. So, yep. And of course our hyperdrive and the back here. Can't go to light speed without a hyperdrive. And of course our cockpit with all of our little tchotchkes. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments.